It's a popular perception amongst many people that listening to binaural beats has a special effect on the brain. They think binaural beats can help you follow a diet or stop smoking, or they think these sounds can amp you up for a competition or calm you down or even improve recall, focus, and concentration. The question is, doesn't listening to any type of relaxing music have such an effect? Possibly. And in this video, we'll find out if listening to sounds like binaural beats can have a positive impact on your mental prowess, more so than listening to Mozart or Pink Floyd. So hit that thumbs up, get subscribed if you're new to the magnetic memory method world, and let's start with the good work of defining our terms. The word binaural means having or relating to two ears, and the process works by sending a slightly different sound frequency to each ear. This has to be done simultaneously and through earphones or headphones, and when two different pure tones are presented separately but simultaneously to each ear of a listener, the listener hears the illusion of a third tone. This third tone appears in addition to the two pure tones presented to each ear, and it is the third tone that is called the binaural beat. Let's break this down a little bit further. When you play a 350 Hz tone in the left ear and a 360 Hz tone in the right, it yields a beat with a frequency of 10 Hz. This third beat is the binaural beat. The brain then uses a process known as frequency following response to follow along at the new frequency of 10 Hz. This process produces brainwaves at that rate of Hertz. However, this outcome apparently occurs only if the difference matches the alpha frequency range that lies between 7 to 11 Hz. Music, or white noise, embedded with binaural beats is very often used along with different meditation techniques and positive affirmations to gain varying results, or at least people claim that varying results emerge. In the memory training and memory improvement world, some claim you will experience results ranging from improvement in recall, concentration, focus, creativity, and alertness. Even more, there are claims that listening to these beats is said to provide relaxation, stress reduction, pain management, and improved sleep quality. Now, historically, at least in my research, binaural beats were first described in 1839 by Prussian scientist H.W. Dove. However, it was Gerald Oster's article in Scientific American in 1973 that brought this process to modern attention. According to Oster, the tones needed to produce binaural beats had to be relatively low frequency, and the beats themselves were in the range of 1 to 30 Hz. This is the range the human brainwave frequencies fall in. But you want to know the real story? Humans have the ability to hear binaural beats as a result of evolutionary adaptation. Many evolved species can detect binaural beats because of their brain structure. The frequencies at which binaural beats can be detected change depending on the size of the species' cranium that you're looking at. In the human, binaural beats can be detected when carrier waves are below approximately 1000 Hz. Of course, binaural beats in terms of therapy is quite different than the binaural process found in music. This process was apparently invented by Manfred Schunke, who used models of the human head created with the help of computer-designed software. As music historian Rob Bowman wrote in the notes for Lou Reed's Between Thought and Expression, the detail was as precise as possible, down to the size, shape, and bone structure of the ear and ear canal. Microphones were then designed to fit each ear, so theoretically, what they recorded would be exactly what a human sitting in the position the head was placed would actually hear. Fascinating, right? Chronic pain impacts between 10 to 50% of the adult population, while costing U.S. businesses, to take just one country, over $61 billion annually. Now, there's something called the Neuromatrix Theory, which suggests that the brain's inability to return to a state of equilibrium is at the crux of chronic pain. Binaural beats has been effective, apparently, in synchronizing brainwaves, also known as entrainment, with an external stimulus. And it has been associated with a number of positive psychological outcomes. Research shows that an external audio protocol of theta binaural beats is effective at reducing perceived change in pain severity. But how does this affect your memory? Well, the answer is simple. Pain-free people pay better attention to their surroundings. Freedom from pain means that your levels of focus and concentration are pretty much automatically better than when they are impacted by ongoing or recurrent pain. I know this quite well because I deal with chronic pain, and on the days that I have less chronic pain, the more I can pay attention better. Being pain-free is so beneficial for learning, because learning requires high levels of concentration, focus, and you're going to be able to remember more if it gets through the filters of pain in the first place. So we need to really, really keep that in mind, and that may be part of the benefit that some people report. Now, the highest frequency brain waves are apparently called gamma waves. These waves can have a frequency of anywhere between 25 and 100 hertz. People whose brains produce more gamma waves are said to have greater ability to concentrate, focus, and experience higher levels of cognition. There's a study by Jira Kitayakorn and Wangswat, apologies if I butchered your names, and they tried to find whether modulation of the brain activity can lead to manipulation of cognitive functions. As they report, the stimulus used in their study was 40 hertz because binaural beat at that hertz induces frequency following response, which is a technical term. And according to the study, listening to 40 hertz binaural beats for 20 minutes enhanced working memory function, evaluated by word list recall tasks. So does that mean we can change our brainwave patterns by listening to specific sounds? Well, maybe, but also maybe not. Think about the nature of the study. And if you want to think better about the nature of studies like these, make sure to signal your interest in advance for my upcoming Beyond Sherlock live cohort course. You can get information about it and be the first to grab a seat when it goes live at magneticmemorymethod.com/BY. Little acronym for Beyond. And we are literally going beyond Sherlock. We're going to learn how to use critical thinking skills to think through what might be problematic about this kind of research report and the finding that your working memory is going to improve. For example, in a study like this, you're given words after listening to binaural beats. Well, why would, after a study, your memory of a random list of words be an indicator of memory improving, right? Like, when in reality do you just come across a list of words that you have to memorize? Maybe at a memory competition. Anyway, this is the kind of critical thinking that we want to do when we come across these studies. So we want to just ask, why? And then to start to think through it and see what parallels to reality might be there. Because there is something called the framing effect, and just because it shows in a study and we have research conditions and so forth, doesn't mean it translates to anything in reality. And then you can just think about probabilistic thinking, which is a great critical thinking strategy. How often do you just have to memorize a random list of words in daily life? Now, there are some studies that I think are a little bit more robust and a little bit more attached to everyday reality, and one of them is by Richard Davidson. He's a neuroscientist, and he found that the brainwaves of trained monks who regularly engaged in meditation produced powerful gamma waves, whereas a control group with non-meditating volunteers had little to no gamma brainwaves. The monks were just through the roof. Now, what does this imply? That you have to become a monk? No, but one way to improve concentration is to practice long-term and short-term meditation in combination. Within a week of consistent meditation, you can start to experience improved concentration. And studies like these very practically show that it doesn't even have to be every day, a minimum of 4 times a week. And you don't have to have any binaural beats, because that would be against the purpose of meditating. What is meditation? It is a time to experience a release from smartphone addiction, where you're sitting there listening to something that tethers you to the great distraction machine, which can get in the way. Now, this is very, very important, and this is why this study is very, very practical in terms of what's going to actually improve your memory, and meditation has a direct link to improve memory. But we still don't have an answer to the question, can binaural beats help memory? Not in theory or practice, according to a research article by David Seaver in 2009 called Entraining Tones and Binaural Beats. But before we get into the argument against binaural beats helping with memory, the actual claims are important to look at. So let's take a step back and try to understand how people claim binaural beats work. The proponents of binaural beats for better memory claim that it improves brainwave entrainment. And this entrainment supposedly influences and drives brainwave activity to a more desired mental state. More specifically, entrainment is called a synchronization of two or more rhythmic cycles, and the process of brainwave entrainment relies on the natural phenomena of synchronization. Basically, they're suggesting that you think about it like this. When you strike a tuning fork and then you place another tuning fork next to it, the second tuning fork automatically starts to vibrate at the same frequency. This is natural synchronization. Pendulum clocks, metronomes, fireflies, and other things in nature actually show examples of natural synchronization. It's a real thing. However, Siever's claim is that entrainment occurs only when there's a constant and repetitive sound of sufficient strength to excite the thalamus. Siever also notes that binaural beats are not very noticeable because the modulation depth, which is the difference between loud and quiet, is very small at just 3 decibels at a 2-to-1 ratio. And here's a longer quote from Siever. He says, "This means that binaural beats are unlikely to produce any significant entrainment because they don't activate the thalamus. But they do have some hypnotic and relaxing effect by way of dissociation, as does white noise and many kinds of music." So the outcome that proponents of binaural beats for better memory are going for comes to maybe what's called the Gans effect. And the Gans effect is the process where the mind quietens as a result of having a monotonous sensory input. And if you have a monotonous mind, well, then you may pay more attention. It's kind of like having less pain. And a natural example of the Gans effect may be experienced while sitting in a large field in the country, while staring into the wide blue sky. You're sitting there, and maybe you imagine listening to the, so to speak, white noise of fluttering leaves falling from the trees, and you're just away from the noise and the stimulation of urban life. So, in other words, thanks to the Gans effect, binaural beats through passive means may help a person relax, may quiet their mind, which may lead to greater attention. So, if in theory binaural beats do not produce entrainment, do they produce entrainment and drive brainwaves in reality? Well, the answer seems to be no, and it's not just Siever who keeps saying no, no, and 1,000 times no. Just because it's similar doesn't mean that it's this actual entrainment effect that's leading to better memory. It can be coming at it from different angles if there is an effect at all. So this is a problem, because if you're going to be a proponent of something and you're going to say that there's this and that effect, like entrainment, and you can't really find it, well, that's a bit of a problem, and it just drags the whole thing down. There's another study. Gerald Oster used a EEG oscilloscope to conclude that binaural beats produced very small potentials within the auditory cortex of the brain. And it means basically that binaural beats are of little benefit in producing auditory entrainment. So there's just many studies. This one from Oster is in Scientific American. There's a researcher named Dale S. Foster. He also found that binaural beats in the alpha frequency produced no more alpha brainwaves than listening to the surf on the beach. And his conclusion is that the analysis of variance of the data revealed that there were no significant differences in alpha production, either within sessions or across sessions. And, it's just like, although alpha production was observed to increase in the binaural beats condition early in some sessions, a tendency was observed for the subjects to move through alpha into desynchronized theta, indicating that they basically were falling into a light sleep. They were dozing off. And how are you going to remember something if you're asleep? Is your attention really higher if you are going into basically a nap, right? It's all really problematic at the end of the day. So I don't know if the reduction of pain leads you to pay more attention. That might lead you to remembering more things if you're basically dozing off into some sort of catatonic state. Now, you can improve your memory though, and your memory improvement training should be linked to memorizing information that will immediately improve your life. So, even if you were to get these benefits, it doesn't matter if it's tested on random words. Memory competitors can memorize more words than you can shake a stick at without listening to binaural beats first. But even if it did give you a benefit, You've got to test it on something substantial, something impactful. And then you got to track your outcomes so that you can think about how to improve what you're going to do with your memory. This is where the secret of building memory palaces, the magnetic memory method way, comes into play. Using this method, you not only get to remember information faster, but you save a lot of time, and you don't have to sit there listening to binaural beats in order for it to work, even though, hey, there's nothing wrong with doing it if you find it useful. And I've done lots of experiments myself with this, and I simply haven't found any benefit. But what I have found a benefit from is thinking very, very critically about the claims that people make, doing some research, reading from multiple angles what's going on, and then if I'm going to listen to something while I'm practicing my memory, it's not going to be music that relaxes me, but it's going to be music that is agitating and distracting so that I can be more effective at using memory techniques in everyday life when there's all kinds of not leaves falling with the wind in an open field, but traffic and people angry in the airport, and still be able to remember critical details about the gate number and where and when the flight is going to take off and be delayed for how many hours, and all these kinds of things that actually matter. Being able to have recall, retention, and long-term retention in situations of distraction. Now, is that kind of skill music to your ears or what?